17-year-old Kurt Sova was reported missing on October 29, 1981, when he failed to return home from a night out with friends. 5 days later, Kurt's body was discovered in a ravine not far from his home. Police reported no signs of physical trauma, and an autopsy failed to provide any answers. His death was ultimately ruled to be that of natural causes. Kurt's parents strongly disagreed with this finding, but there appeared to be no evidence to support alternative theories. 3 months later, the body of 13-year-old Eugene Kvet was discovered in a ravine just 2.5 miles from where Kurt's body had been found. Strangely, both boys were found fully clothed, but missing their shoes. Each boy's left shoe was discovered at the scene, but the right shoes were never recovered. Was it mere coincidence, or do these two cases suggest foul play? Welcome to Trace Evidence, Episode 1, The Mysterious Death of Kurt Sova. Welcome to the Trace Evidence Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Pacheco. With this being the first episode, I wanted to give a little bit of information about the podcast before getting into the case of Kurt Sova. The Trace Evidence Podcast examines unsolved cases of all types, from disappearances to murders, from cases with little or no coverage to those that have received major media attention. I've always found myself to be one of those people that's haunted by the unknown. I have an absolute need to know the why and how of things, and for me, it's the questions without answers that keep me up at night. The Trace Evidence Podcast is my attempt to shine light onto unsolved cases, to invite others into these mysteries, and to open up discussion and interest. Although it's always possible that discussing a particular case could shake loose some evidence and perhaps make a difference. At the end of the day, my ultimate goal is to share what knowledge I have of these cases, to go over the evidence, and to invite others to share their thoughts and theories. I am by no means a detective, and much like you, I'm someone fascinated by true crime who, after years of listening to other podcasts and watching shows like America's Most Wanted and Unsolved Mysteries, I wanted to step into the arena myself and discuss the cases that stick in my mind. Although I do have a large list of cases I plan to cover, I'm open to your suggestions, especially if there's a case that is fresh or recent or especially personal to you. If you have lost a loved one to a violent crime, or if a friend or relative has vanished, I'm open to hear from you and willing to bring whatever attention I can to your case. So if you know of a case that you think I should cover, please contact me and we can go from there. The Trace Evidence Podcast has a group on Facebook that you can join. Simply search Trace Evidence Podcast and it'll show up. Your request will be approved as soon as possible. The group is only closed so that you can speak freely without your posts showing up on your timeline and all of your friends and family seeing them. In addition, you can email me your questions, comments, or case suggestions at traceevidencepod@gmail.com. That's TraceEvidencepod@gmail.com. I wanted to cover the case of Kurt Sova on the debut episode because it's one that has stuck with me for most of my life. I first heard about this case when I was a child watching Unsolved Mysteries, and I've periodically looked into it over the years. This is one of those cases where the more details you discover, the stranger and more confusing it becomes. This is the mysterious death of Kurt Sova. According to friends and family, 17-year-old Kurt Sova was a kind, intelligent, dependable guy. Kurt was not the stereotypical rebellious teenager causing trouble and staying out late partying. On the contrary, Kurt was respectful and mature for his age. He listened to his parents, followed their rules, and always called if he was going to be late. On the evening of October 28, 1981, Kurt left home to get together with a friend. Originally, having planned to attend a local carnival, plans changed when Kurt and his friend decided to attend a Halloween party being held at a duplex in Newburgh Heights, Ohio, not very far from where they lived. Many guests at the party were older and unknown to Kurt, having come in from Detroit a few hours' drive away. Kurt's arrival at this party begins a series of unexplained circumstances, contradictions, and outright lies about what occurred at the party, and more specifically, what happened to Kurt himself. When Kurt failed to arrive home from the party, his parents became worried. It was unlike Kurt to not come home, especially without so much as a phone call. His parents began blanketing the neighborhood, searching for their missing son. After several hours of searching, Kurt's parents decided to file a missing persons report with the local police. Kurt's parents began papering local businesses with flyers and asking Kurt's friends if they had any information about his whereabouts. When they found out about the party, Kurt's mother visited the duplex herself. The owner, however, told Kurt's mother that there had been no party and that she had never seen nor heard of Kurt. Although suspicious about this statement, there wasn't much Kurt's parents could do. They continued their search, looking all over town and asking everyone they saw if they had seen Kurt. Over the next few days, several strange things occurred. At a local record store, which had one of Kurt's flyers in the window, a strange man came in one day. He walked into the store and said to an employee, "You see that kid on the flyer? You might as well take it down. He's going to be found dead in a couple of days." This strange incident was reported to the police, who began searching for the strange man. Another weird incident occurred when one of Kurt's friends reported seeing Kurt several days after Kurt had disappeared. The friend was on his way to a job interview when he spotted Kurt on the side of the road walking towards a van with several people in it he didn't recognize. The friend claims he heard Kurt yell out, "Hey Franco," before he lost sight of him. Unfortunately, Kurt's friend was unaware that Kurt was missing at the time and didn't suspect anything too out of the ordinary to be going on. Several witnesses interviewed by police contradicted the duplex owner's story. A pizza delivery man said that he had delivered a large quantity of pizzas to the duplex on the night Kurt disappeared, and that it was very clear a party wasn't going on. Police managed to track down several people who had attended the party. Many of them recalled seeing Kurt, but were unaware of his current whereabouts or what could have happened. There were no statements of anything odd occurring at the party or with any of the attendees. Witnesses, however, did state that Kurt had been drinking heavily. He was seen to be drinking Everclear, a powerful liquor with a high proof. This came as a surprise to both Kurt's parents and friends, as none knew him to be much of a drinker, if a drinker at all. Kurt had a slight build, and considering his lack of experience with alcohol and probable low tolerance, the volume of liquor he was described as consuming could be dangerous. One particular witness stated that Kurt had become heavily intoxicated and looked as though he was going to be sick. The witness said that he helped Kurt outside, and the night having gotten cold, the witness left Kurt leaning against a chain-link fence while he went back inside the party to get Kurt's jacket. When he returned several minutes later, Kurt was nowhere to be found. He wasn't sure if Kurt had wandered off in a drunken state, had run into friends who helped him away, or if maybe Kurt had stumbled into a bad situation with someone else. Faced with this information, Kurt's parents began to suspect foul play in relation to the owner of the duplex. The owner, when confronted by police with the witness statements, changed her story completely. She now admitted that the party had occurred, and that a boy fitting Kurt's description had, strangely, been sleeping on a cot in her basement for several days. Somewhat reluctant to believe her, Kurt's father went to the duplex to search for Kurt. In the basement, he did in fact find a cot which appeared to have been recently slept in. However, he could find no trace of his son. 6 days after the party, 3 young boys were playing in a ravine near the Sova residence when they stumbled upon the body of Kurt. Kurt was dressed in the same clothes he had worn to the party, although he was now barefoot. Police discovered his left shoe shoved into a pile of rocks nearby, but never located his right shoe. No signs of assault, nor injuries to Kurt's body outside of minor cuts and scrapes were discovered. Baffled, and without any indication of bodily harm, Kurt's death was ultimately ruled by the coroner to be natural causes. The Sova family refuses to accept this ruling, believing foul play was involved in the death of their son. Kurt's parents had in fact been through that ravine just 24 hours prior to the discovery of Kurt's body, and are certain it had not been there. If they are correct, where had Kurt been for the 5 days that he had been missing? On the day Kurt's body was discovered, the strange man who had previously visited the record store and said that Kurt would be found dead returned to the store, this time giving the employee a bouquet of flowers and a card reading, "Roses are red, the sky is blue, They found him dead, and they will find you dead too." Feeling frightened by this, the employee again contacted the police, who managed to track down the strange man. However, they dismissed the odd behavior, saying he was a drifter with some mental disabilities, but they did not believe him to be involved with Kurt's death. He was released by police and never seen in the area again. There are some questions as to whether or not this mysterious drifter could perhaps be the Franco that a previous witness said he saw Kurt with in the days after his disappearance. Whether or not the police had this particular piece of information available to them at the time that they questioned the drifter is unknown, but if they did, I'd have to believe they'd have taken a closer look at him. Police, however, would very much like to question the individual named Franco about his connection and possible involvement in the death of Kurt Sova. In yet another strange twist, less than 4 months after the discovery of Kurt Sova, on February 1st, 1982, the body of 13-year-old Eugene Kvet was found. Eugene had been reported missing on January 27th, and although not much information exists on the Kvet case, that which is public bears an eerie similarity to the case of Kurt Sova. Both Kvet and Sova had been missing for 5 days before their bodies were discovered on the 6th. Eugene's body was found in a ravine just 2.5 miles from where Kurt's had been. In a very strange coincidence, much like Kurt, Eugene's right shoe was also missing and has never been located. There's very little information in regard to the death of Eugene Kvet, and local police are tight-lipped about releasing any information about either Eugene or Kurt's cases. Kurt's case remains open, and has been reclassified as a probable accident. Investigators assigned to the case have said that they hope new evidence may come to light to solve this case. It has been 36 years since the death of Kurt Sova. Today he would be 53 years old. Both of Kurt's parents have passed away in the years since, his father in 2001 and his mother in 2014, having never known the truth about what caused the death of their son. Since Kurt died in 1981, it's hard to know exactly what kind of forensics were done and how in-depth his autopsy would have been, although it seems unlikely that toxicology wouldn't have been performed to determine if alcohol were in fact involved in his death. Being that the coroner ruled his death to be of natural causes, I would have to assume that they didn't find any strange or suspicious evidence in his body in relation to the possibility of foul play. That being said, we are dealing with a small-town police force without the technological advances of today. Whether or not there is a connection to the Eugene Kvet death, or if this isn't just albeit extremely strange coincidence, there has to be someone with more information. If Kurt's parents are certain that his body was not in the ravine the day before it was discovered, then someone else has to be involved. Kurt's parents took the tragedy and mystery of their son's death to their graves. The loss of a child is a heartbreaking one, especially without the extra added pain of never knowing what truly happened to your child. Perhaps someday this case will be solved. Until then, the death of Kurt Sova remains a complex mystery full of twists and turns for which there are no immediate answers. There's a lot of questions about this case that have always bothered me. Kurt's parents believed strongly that foul play was involved in the death of their son. It's not unusual for a teenage boy to go out drinking at a party and for his parents to not know about it. So it's definitely possible that Kurt drank and partied a little bit more than parents and friends were likely to say at the time, but still, it seems odd that a 17-year-old boy is going to go to a party with a friend, get extremely drunk, disappear, be gone for several days, and then show up dead and nobody knows what happened to him. I myself, as a teenager, went to a lot of parties, and when I went with my friends, I always sort of knew what they were up to, and I certainly would notice if one of them disappeared. And had one of my friends disappeared, it seems likely that I'd have gone to their parents the next day and told them that I didn't know what happened to them, not that I would wait for the parents to find out for themselves. So, I've always wondered if perhaps alcohol poisoning could have been involved in this case, but as I said in the case evidence section, I have to believe they ran toxicology on Kurt, and I'm not an expert in how toxicology works, but I know that they can get a blood alcohol content level to determine if that was involved in the death. The thing that I think makes it strange is that Kurt's body's found 5 days after he disappears. So is it possible that Kurt didn't die immediately, that he was sick for several days, and that gave time for his blood alcohol content to go down? Which I guess is where the question of the duplex comes in. The whole story about the party and the statement from the owner of the duplex just blows my mind. How is it possible that you have a party and a 17-year-old kid comes there, perhaps drinks a little too much, and then he sleeps on a cot in your basement for several days, but you don't know his name, you don't know where he comes from, you don't try and contact anybody, and when you call and say a kid's been sleeping on a cot in your basement and the father comes over to check and he's not there, you don't have any indication that this kid has left already? This makes me believe that it's possible Kurt went to this party, Kurt drank too much, Kurt got ill, Kurt possibly got alcohol poisoning, and the owner of the duplex and the person throwing the party didn't want to get in trouble for giving alcohol to a 17-year-old, so they just brought him down into the basement, put him on a cot, and hoped that after, a few hours of sleep, he'd be better. But you'd have to assume that after the first day, and when he's not better, you're going to have to do something, even if you just take him to an emergency room, drop him off, and leave him there and don't stay to fill out information. But that's not what happens here. Another piece of information that I've been unable to locate is in relation to the duplex owner herself. Now, she says that she's got a kid sleeping on a cot in her basement. She doesn't know his name or anything about him. But what I always wondered is, when Kurt's parents went to speak to her, was she able to give a description of the kid who was staying in her basement, and did that description match Kurt himself? These are questions, I suppose, that are probably never going to be answered. This case is 36 years old, and I would think anybody who was involved with it at the time would have come forward by now. It seems to me the most likely solution to this case is that, as I stated previously, Kurt went to a party, Kurt had too much to drink, Kurt got ill from drinking, wasn't given proper care, and Kurt passed away as a result of his injuries. However, Kurt's parents swear they searched the ravine the day before Kurt was found, and Kurt's body wasn't there, so Kurt's body was found the next day, and his parents contradicted that story. But if Kurt had been sick in the basement, it's possible that when he passed away, the body was hidden and the people involved didn't know what to do with it and later decided to dump it in a ravine in hopes that it would be discovered. The most fascinating pieces of evidence that call the entire theory of this case into question for me is the death of Eugene Kvet. Kurt dies. It's ruled natural causes. There's no real evidence of foul play or trauma. It's not like Kurt was stabbed or shot. It's not like his body was bruised and beaten. But then a couple of months later, another boy is found in another ravine not far away, missing his right shoe also. The whole shoe thing is strange. In the case of Kurt, I could see it being possible that Kurt drank himself into a situation where he couldn't even walk. In that case, you might be carrying him. If it's more than one person and you're carrying him from his upper body, his legs might be dragging behind you and his shoes could come off. I suppose that's possible. The weird thing about it is the left shoe being found in a pile of rocks and the right shoe never being found. And then when you factor in the case of Eugene Kvet and his body being found and his right shoe never being located, that's a really strange coincidence to happen in these two cases. But it's possible that that's all it is a coincidence. I guess it's the similarities between the deaths of Kurt Sova and the similarity in the death of Eugene Kvet that makes this case that much more mysterious. I think without the death of Eugene Kvet and the missing shoe similarity, I don't know that this case would be as mysterious as it is. I don't know if Kurt's parents later on ever had him exhumed and had a second autopsy performed. But in my opinion, it's most likely that the death of Kurt Sova occurred as a result of the alcohol and the party. There were theories at the time, but they were sourceless, but there were theories of foul play taking place at the party and some of the older people getting into an incident with Kurt. Kurt being young and intoxicated may have said something that upset these people. But you would assume that if anything like that had happened, that would have been noticed on the body pretty quickly or the coroner would have spotted it. The death of Kurt Sova is just one of those mysterious cases that is haunting, but sad. I think it's more sad than it is haunting. Kurt's parents went to their graves never knowing what really happened to their son. And it's possible that what happened to their son was alcohol poisoning or natural causes, and that they didn't want to accept this or they couldn't accept this. Grief represents itself in different ways, and unfortunately, grief-stricken relatives are not typically the best sources of information when it comes to cases like these. Regardless of what actually happened in this case, there's still hope that somebody at some point will come forward and tell exactly what happened. Until that day, the death of Kurt Sova is just another mystery that we don't have the answers to. If you're interested in finding out more information about the death of Kurt Sova, there's an episode of Unsolved Mysteries that covers some of the broad strokes. There are also several online forums that discuss the case, including Reddit. A quick Google search of Kurt Sova will bring up several different sites where you can explore the case. There are also links to further information on the Kurt Sova case posted in our Facebook group. For now, that was the case of the mysterious death of Kurt Sova. In future episodes, I'll cover more unsolved cases. Some of these cases are fascinating, but there's not always a great deal of evidence available. In instances where particular cases are thin in evidence, I'll record episodes covering two separate cases. I don't particularly like a podcast to be too short, so in that sense, there will be times where I address the details and evidence of two cases in a single episode. I'd love to know what you think is the perfect length for a podcast episode. Let me know, and I'll see what I can do to oblige. I know some people love really long podcasts, and others appreciate shorter episodes. I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Trace Evidence Podcast and invite you to join our Facebook group. Simply search for Trace Evidence Podcast on Facebook. Let us know how you found the podcast and what you'd like to hear in the future. In addition to joining the Facebook group, you can contact me with questions, comments, or case suggestions at traceevidencepod@gmail.com. That's traceevidencepod@gmail.com. I'm always eager to hear your feedback. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes and leave us a review. This will greatly help our reach and bring more attention to the cases we cover. Thanks for listening, and I'll hope you'll join us for the next episode of Trace Evidence.